Hello and welcome to the Autosport WEC review of the season. The 2023 FIA World Endurance saw the Hypercar category enter a new era as 7 manufacturers lined up for the opening race of the season. It promised so much, and while Toyota came out on top, it delivered some incredible racing battles and some standout drives and team performances. My name is Steph Wentworth, and I am delighted to be joined by Autosport's own Gary Watkins and WEC commentator, WEC World Champion and former F1 driver Anthony Davidson to take a look back at a fantastic year for the sport. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. Great to be here with you and Gary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to talking about a season that I really enjoyed and a season I've been looking forward to for so many years of my very long career.
Well, Gary, let's talk about how excited you were ahead of the start of the season, because coming into Sebring, the expectations were high and everyone was very much looking forward to the season ahead.
Well, I'm going to say those golden words that I keep getting told off for. And there, I've blown it, haven't I? Because I've said the word golden already. We've all been predicting this is a golden era with new rules that have brought in all these manufacturers. And yes, it is a golden era. And so I'm going to keep on saying it because we had 7 makes this year, 5 OEMs, 2 sort of what I call garage easts. We've got more coming next year and at least 1 more the year after. So it really is something special, something that has not happened before in my career. And I'm going to have to tell you that my trip to Le Mans this year was my 33rd as a journalist. So I have been around the block a bit, and sports car racing, centered on Le Mans and the World Championship has never been as strong. So yes, I was very, very excited.
And what were your kind of expectations once you landed in Sebring? What were you expecting from the season ahead?
Well, like Gary was saying, first and foremost, it was exciting because for the first time in a long, long time, we had more competitors taking the fight to Toyota. It had been Toyota's stomping ground, hadn't it, the last couple of seasons on the build up to this season. And, obviously the expectation was that Toyota would be the benchmark. They were the ones with the target on their back, the ones for all to try and beat. But there was also a level of anticipation and expectation in terms of more teams coming to take that fight to them. And that's something we'd been just chomping at the bit for, relishing the fact that we would finally, after all this time of, let's be honest, quite a few dry seasons of the World Endurance Championship since we waved goodbye to LMP1 proper and Porsche and Audi, left Toyota really to run rings around the remains of what we could call competition. Now, this was the real deal. We had Ferrari and Porsche and Cadillac, and the list goes on, all joining the mix to try and take victory, not just from the first race, but the whole season, Le Mans included. And that's what we that's what we went there to see. And all season long, we weren't disappointed.
And on that topic of some brand new manufacturers coming in, the first weekend at Sebring saw Ferrari put it straight on pole. Gary, did that surprise you? Was that something you were expecting?
Yes, it did surprise me, and I don't think I was the only one who was surprised. And I'm going to say that the excitement stretched right into the Ferrari pit. They weren't expecting to put it to see their car, the 499P, a Le Mans Hypercar, on pole, but there it was. Antonio Fuoco pulled out a mega lap. I think it really was something special. When he came round the last corner, he couldn't see. He was blinded by the sun in his eyes. They call it, most people call it turn 17, but it's also referred to as sunshine curve sometimes. He couldn't see. He put it on pole. I thought, that was pretty amazing. So yes, it was a surprise, I think, to everyone, including Ferrari and, of course, Toyota.
And Ant, just talking about Ferrari a little bit more, they were kind of rookie rivals of Toyota, and that meant that more of Toyota's rivals actually this year were kind of rookies. They were new to the class, they were new to Hypercar. Did that make Toyota's job a little bit easier? That the fact that all of their rivals were rookies and were new to the championship?
Well, I think at different points, and the first race included, at different points throughout the season, we saw sporadically the pace of others come and go. I think more often than not, others seem to have the outright pace, as Ferrari proved right from word go in Sebring. They arrived, they looked quick in practice, they looked like a well-oiled machine straight away, fresh out of the box with their brand new car. And the drivers were, a lot of them straight out of GT racing, but looked very at home in the new hypercar category. So, and they knew their way around Sebring as well. So they had the speed, but it became apparent immediately when we had the green lights at the start of the race that Toyota had something else up their sleeve. They had experience, and that goes a long, long way in endurance racing. And it's not just the experience of how you set your car up or how the drivers feel behind the wheel. It's just operationally that you need to be super slick and at the top of your game. And that's what we saw from Toyota. I would say definitely the first half of the season, they were head and shoulders above the rest. And I'm kind of glad that they were in many ways, because it shows it's not easy. You know, you might be called Ferrari or Porsche, but you turn up trying to beat a team that's been there for years in their 11th season doing this. It's not easy, and you can have the speed, but they didn't have the operational prowess of Toyota, and that's really what held them back in those long races. So it took a while. You could see how green people were at the beginning, drivers included, but not Toyota. They hit the ground running and really stamped their authority early on in the championship.
I'm so glad you mentioned their operational prowess, because you actually talked about that in the very, very first weekend of commentary. And clearly you still maintain that that's the difference in the end, that was where they made up the difference against their rivals. So I guess for you, it wasn't really a great surprise that Toyota ended up taking both the drivers and the Constructors' Championship.
No, that's the thing. Over a whole season, you've got to be strong. That's the beauty of Le Mans is that it's a one-day event, and you can be good on that one day and walk away with so much glory. But to win the championship, you need to be there from the beginning all the way through to the end, including Le Mans. And that's exactly what Toyota had this season compared to the competition. Next year might be a very different story. And also that second half of the season, we were already seeing a much more slick operation from all of the newcomers. Even Peugeot, I'd still class them as a newcomer. They only joined with a few races to go last season. And you could see at different points they were learning the mechanical elements of their car. Reliability was a big problem for so many others, and Toyota seemed to have that sorted as well. So they had so many strings to their bow that I'm not surprised in many ways that the others couldn't beat them over the course of the championship. But like I say, at different points throughout races or different events we went to, you certainly saw the speed was there, and the threat was becoming more and more real every single race that we went through in the championship.
Absolutely. Gary, would you say the same? Would you say that you expected Toyota to come out on top over the course of the season?
Yeah, if I was a betting man, of course I'd have put my money on Toyota for all the reasons that Ant said there. Toyota's been in the WEC since 2012, since when he started driving with them. They're an well-oiled racing machine. And I think there are a couple of other key reasons why they came out on top. As Ant said, one lap speed, we saw it straight out the box, Ferrari, bang on pole. But in a race, over a stint, and crucially over a double stint on the tyres, which you have to do in WEC, not every time, but the tyre allocation means that you have to do a certain number of doubles over the course of a race. They just had so much better performance on the tyres right through to the end. They lived with the deg much better than their rivals with, and that's all their rivals, not just Ferrari. And I think that was very key. I think tactically, Toyota very seldom make mistakes. And let's not forget that the others were newcomers. They were learning about the WEC. Okay, you say the factory Ferrari team is AF Corsa. They've been there in GTE Pro and GTE and forever. But still, they were moving up to the front of the field. So the way you react to a safety car or a full course yellow, for example, is different. And we saw it within a few laps of the start at Sebring. There was a safety car, and Ferrari did something. They pitted one of their cars. I thought, really? And it was a tactical error. And, you know, we saw further tactical errors from Ferrari through the year. Perhaps a few more penalties than Toyota. It'd be interesting to do a tot-up of those. But yeah, I think Toyota is just, it's been there, it's done it, it's got that ingrained experience. The way they overcome problems at the back end of the season at Bahrain, they had a clutch issue and they overcame the clutch issue just in an interesting way. You know, they sussed the problem, they realized what they had to do. They had to start on the hybrid system, but they couldn't start in first gear. And as we all know, it's easier to bump start an engine in second gear than it is to first gear, and things like that. It's just, yeah, they can think on their feet, and they just have a deep well of experience.
Excellent. Well, this year saw many changes in the regulations, including changes to balance of performance that was introduced this season. Now, Gary, could you explain a little bit about the regulations, explain a little bit about it in simple terms for everyone listening?
In simple terms, now that's going to be tough. Basically, the balance of performance in sports car racing, and it's been part of the scene for knocking on 20 years now, not at the very pinnacle in the top classes, but down in the GT ranks, over in sort of the other realms of sports car racing, sort of not the ACO World Championship realm. Yeah, we're all too familiar with it. So BOP has been part of the new hyperclass since the beginning in 2021, and there was a new way, a new system, a new protocols, new whatever you want to call them, introduced for this year, and it's very much based on simulation and assessing the potential of the car. And there was less scope than previously to change the BOP. In 21 and 22, the sort of basically the BOP could be recalculated after 2 races. You know, depending on sort of the conditions. If it was a wet race, it wouldn't count, for example. But now we had a system where the BOP was pretty firm up to Le Mans. There could only be one change, and that change could only be in terms of the balance between the 2 different types of car that race in the hypercar, and that they are confusingly called Le Mans Hypercar, which is your Toyota, your Ferrari, your Peugeot, and the LMDHs, which for the moment in 2023 in WEC was just Cadillac and Porsche. And the reason for that is slightly different rule sets: front hybrids for the LMHs, rear hybrids for the LMDHs. So there could only be one change, which was meant to come, or could come, only after 2 races. Then there would be a major change after Le Mans, where they could sort of tinker with the whole BOP. Then for the rest of the season, another change after 2 races, set in stone for the rest of the year. So that was how it was meant to be. Now, do you want me to tell the rest of the story, or is that for later? We're talking about
full story is excellent.
Well, okay, the story then continues that this was set in stone, and the idea was to avoid sandbagging, you know, going more slowly than you can to try and get a favourable BOP, probably with an eye on Le Mans. It's been done before in the GT ranks, and I don't want to mention manufacturers by name, but they know who they are. So that was the big, one of the sort of guiding principles, or the reasons for introducing this new system, Well, we come up to Le Mans. We didn't get a change in the balance between LMH and LMDH after 2 races. We're coming up to Le Mans, and we got just a few days before the cars were due on track at the Le Mans test day, which is the weekend ahead of Le Mans. We got a new BOP with tinkering right across the board with the 5 manufacturers and the 2 independents. And this was highly controversial because it was outside of the guidelines laid down by the rule makers, that's the ACO and the FIA. So that was highly controversial. And the reason they gave for it was that the gaps, they said, between the LMHs, so I'm talking about Toyota, Ferrari, Peugeot again, were too big. So there needed to be a readjustment. Well, that rhetoric, the gaps between the LMH is too big, basically is code for Toyota was too quick and won the first 2 races pretty much as they pleased. Now, that's me being slightly cynical, but clearly that was one of the reasons for the change, and the organisers could not have a runaway victory at Le Mans. And don't forget that this was the centenary running of the Le Mans 24 hours. So a very, very important event for the ACO. So the BOP was changed sort of as a fait accompli. The manufacturers were phoned up and told, well, actually zoomed up in these days. There was a Zoom meeting and they said, yeah, BOP's changing. Sorry that we're doing that. Was that simple enough or...
Simple enough indeed, yes. But how could we forget? It was the centenary edition and Ferrari did take that historic victory at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. But that wasn't just down to the BOP changes, and was it? There were more factors at play that meant that Ferrari got that victory.
Yeah, absolutely, Steph. Gary described it really well. The story behind the BOP, from a technical standpoint. The problem that I think the ACO and the FIA had, though, was that naturally, as we've already touched on, the new teams were getting faster anyway. And of course, I'm sure they all play the game somehow. It's part and parcel of BOPs. That's why I very rarely talk about it, because they're all playing around for that one big race in the season, Le Mans. And then on top of that, it's the centenary as well, the one they desperately want to win. New team, Ferrari, they return to the top 5 World Sports Car Championship. And of course, they must have known we can't really expect to win the championship in our first year, but we'll have a damn good go at Le Mans. And by that time in the year, they were ready. Operationally, they were ready. Very slick, a very different team that turned up to Sebring. And they had a little tickle of BOP as well. I'm sure Toyota would argue not just a tickle, a massive footprint in the sand of BOP handed their way. But in reality, it wasn't that much of a difference. And I had been seeing their performance getting better and better all the way through, continuously through the season. They had a difficult Spa, but they showed speed there when they could get their tyres working. I think it was such cold conditions. I think we had 6 degrees ambient at the lowest point in Spa, and they really struggled with their tyres. This is what went against them in Sebring. They were overheating their tyres, but in Spa, they just couldn't run the harder tyre, the one that they needed to be on, and that really went against them there. That's why they started the race in the rain. The whole race went against them. But when they could switch their tyres on, and got the car into the sweet spot, they were fast. And I saw strengths on their car. They had good top speed. The car looked very efficient. It looked easier to drive on those faster circuits. And I just had a feeling that despite any BOP change, they were going to be a threat to Toyota. And then they turned up and they were a little bit quicker. And Toyota knew it. I think Toyota handled it brilliantly well for how seething they were and how disappointed they were to not have the fastest car. And my goodness, they tried, and they made it as hard work for Ferrari as they could possibly make it. And I think that's what made it such a spectacular event.
Absolutely. It was truly a incredible centenary edition. I'm not sure there's much more that we could have asked for in that race. It gave us everything. How big of an impact, Ant, do you think Ferrari's win at Le Mans was? Because they are a huge manufacturer. The scarlet red is absolutely iconic throughout the world of motorsport. It was a really important win, wasn't it?
It was a massively important win, not just for Ferrari, but for the World Endurance Championship as well. You know, it was a seal of approval, wasn't it, for the championship? Ferrari have arrived, and people came to watch. I've never seen a Le Mans crowd like it. I've never seen, in general, a World Endurance Championship crowd like it all season long. We went to Monza later in the year, after Ferrari's win, of course. And it was big news here in the UK. It was massive news back at Maranello in Italy. They were parading the streets. It was like a team that had just won the World Cup final. It was impressive scenes. And when we went to Monza, they were out there. The same crowd that would come to Formula One races were there to watch that scarlet red Ferrari, quickly becoming an iconic car, and it really captured the imagination. And actually, Ferrari fans and tifosi, they finally had something to get behind and be proud of, because they delivered, and that's what they've been waiting for in the Formula One world for so many years, since Kimi Raikkonen won the championship, and finally they had this beautiful car and excellent team in the World Endurance Championship to really cheer on, knowing that they had a serious chance of victory and pole positions and general success moving forward from that point on.
Yeah, and just to add to what Ant said there, going back to my earlier point about tyre wear and how Toyota handle tyre deg better than their rivals. Now, we get to Le Mans, the tyre allocation is different. And of course, as Ant knows far better than I do, Le Mans with its long straights is not a high deg circuit. So one of the disadvantages that the Ferrari had, certainly at the first three races and again after Le Mans, but we really did see it as the first two races, that's Sebring and Portimao, wasn't a factor at Le Mans because you're not just putting the same amount of load through the tyres at Le Mans, so consistently, because you have so much straight, basically, and that really was a significant factor. And okay, the BOP changed after Le Mans, and this little tickle, as Ant said, that helped them. They got tickled the other way, and were certainly less competitive. But I think they were again handicapped by the fact that they just weren't as good over a double stint on a set of Michelin tyres as Toyota.
Yeah, and absolutely. Going forward, I'm sure there are going to be a lot more eyes on the World Endurance Championship now that Ferrari have cemented themselves as a real force to be reckoned with. And you just touched upon it. We saw huge crowds at Le Mans, Monza, also Spa, these classic tracks which invite motorsport fans. The growth of the sport, the growth of the World Endurance Championship and sports car racing is really encouraging to see, don't you think, Gary?
Well, absolutely. And as you touched on there, Ferrari is so important. They bring so much to any championship they compete in because they're Ferrari. It's as simple as that. So, they put bums on seats, they get people through the door. And clearly at Monza, just a few weeks after Ferrari had triumphed at Le Mans, there was going to be a massive crowd, wasn't there? To see the Ferrari racing on home turf for the first time, but also to see the Le Mans winning team racing on home turf. So I think that was very encouraging. But you mentioned Spa as well. That's sort of one of the tracks that's been a fixture on the WEC calendar since the series was reborn in 2012, and it's got a lot of heritage as a sports car track. So it was good to see a big crowd there. I'd like to see the series back at Silverstone, and I'm sure we know British fans love sports car racing. We see 50,000, 60,000 of them at Le Mans each year. I'm sure Silverstone would get a great crowd as well. And I'm hoping that when we go to COTA, that the new buzz about the WEC will finally bring out a decent crowd at that circuit as well.
Well, we've spent a lot of time talking about two of the main protagonists, Ferrari and Toyota, but let's have a look at some of the other hypercar teams. Let's take a look at Porsche, Cadillac and Peugeot. The Caddies showed flashes of performance here and there. Peugeot led a few races in specific conditions, but they struggled throughout the year with mainly electrical issues. Whereas Porsche made it onto the podium and were racing hard in a few races, genuinely had some good performance. And let's start with you. What are your thoughts on their season?
Yeah, it's easy just to talk about Ferrari, but we do that naturally because Ferrari were, I would say, most consistently Toyota's biggest threat and, of course, winners of Le Mans. But the others were there as well and had their fair share at different races of the action. Cadillac were right there from word go in Sebring. It's a circuit that the team knows very well, the drivers know very well. They compete a lot of the time in IMSA, in the American version of WEC, of course. And it was clear to see that they knew what they were doing. They knew their way around that track. And one slight advantage that they had compared to their other LMDH runners was that they seemed to have slightly better tyre wear. And that really served them well later on in every driver's stint when they were respectively behind the wheel. You could see it was just the car was coming on a bit stronger towards the end of the stint compared to particularly the Porsches that they had pretty much a race-long battle with. And Cadillac they had a very consistent season, actually. They ran multiple cars at races like Spa and, of course, Le Mans. They had that massive crash with Ringo van der Zande at Spa, that horrific crash in Eau Rouge where they had a power steering problem and poor old Ringo took him offline and really quick into the barriers. We were glad to see him walk away from that one okay. So yeah, they had a bit of an up and down season as you'd naturally expect in terms of reliability, but their performance as a team I thought was very strong. Peugeot, I expected more from them. I really did. I think they expected more. They were the most experienced of the rookies, having joined at the tail end of last season. I really thought that when we went back to races, so like Monza, where they'd been before, I thought naturally they'd be faster than they were. Their reliability still plagued them throughout this season in 2023. And it was a shame to see. I think the drivers were frustrated, the team members were frustrated as well, but they got a bit better towards the end. I think they're very much looking forward to what they've learned with this year's car and correct things going forward for next season. Porsche, I think late on in the championship, we could see they were, I think you said it, they were a genuine threat to Toyota in Fuji. That race really stands out for me. I think they had a good season. I probably expected a little bit more from them as well, if I'm honest, especially at the beginning of the year, the Penske Porsche team, especially with their credentials in both IMSA and WEC from the past, and the two forces joining together with a very experienced driver lineup. I really thought that they would be more continuously a threat and with Ferrari challenging Toyota all the time. But we had to wait for that moment until Fuji, where they led the majority of the race, actually. And for a moment, I thought they were going to win it. So that was a great race for them there. Lots of positive points from the season for all of the rookie teams. And I think that's what really whets the appetite moving forward to next year.
Oh, definitely. 2024 will be very interesting for those teams. Gary, what did you make of their season in 2023? Were you also expecting a little bit more from them?
As we've been saying, I think we both expected Toyota to be on top because, for all the reasons that we've said, they're the incumbent kings, aren't they, of the WEC. Now, we had the sort of, I think, from the word go, Ferrari were number 2 in the pecking order, but it was very, very close with Cadillac at the start. I think on another day they could have come away with a podium at Sebring. They didn't get on the podium again. Well, in fact, they only got on the podium once at Le Mans, and I think that's something we really need to talk about: how competitive Cadillac were with their LMDH at Le Mans. I think if you look, they ended up 3rd and 4th. that was third with the regular Ganassi car entered in the full championship, and fourth with the extra car that came over from IMSA and was actually the quicker car. Had Sébastien Bourdais, a sort of son of Le Mans, who was actually born in a hospital at Terre Rouge, so he knows his way around there. He was blindingly fast. They actually ended up fourth because they had a bit of a messy race. They were hit up the rear. They had a penalty, a significant minute stop go for exceeding tyre pressures. There are another couple of little incidents, but that car genuinely had the pace to be in the mix in the Toyota Ferrari battle. Now, whether when push came to shove at the end of the day, as the conditions are changing, a sort of after lunch on Sunday, if they could have had the pace to match Toyota and Ferrari, that's a big question mark, and we don't know. And probably the answer is no. But they could have, I think, on another day, Cadillac could have been right there and finished on the lead lap. Now, Porsche showed flashes of speed at Le Mans, but ultimately they sort of withered and they didn't make it into the top 6. They had too many little problems, and that was really the story of the first half of their year. They did get a podium in Portimao, but it was a bit sort of more by luck than judgment. Now, after the summer break, when, so we had Le Mans closely followed by Monza, then we had a big break until Fuji. They pitched up at Fuji, and I don't think they could have won the race, but I think they could have snuck between the two Toyotas on another day. Laurens Vanthoor, in the quickest of the two cars, made a bit of a cheeky move at the first corner, gets the car into the lead, and Porsche's basically stayed there for 4 of the 6 hours. And there were times when, Toyota's frustration, when one of the Toyotas came up behind Kevin Estre in the Porsche, he couldn't get past. They then actually flicked positions, Toyota did, to allow the other driver to have a go at him and try and get past. So that shows you how competitive the Porsche was there. They actually still finished third, even though they had a fueling issue, which was a bit of a weird thing. They didn't put enough fuel in the car after their reconnaissance lap, so it's a procedural problem. So they came third and did what they did whilst the drivers were having to do significant fuel save. So that shows you, truly they were competitive there. And when we move on to Bahrain, the final race of the year, Porsche was competitive again there, but actually the quickest car there and the top finishing Porsche was the Jota car, the customer car. Yifei Ye, the Chinese driver who actually just left the employ of Porsche Asia Pacific, was, I think, probably the quickest driver of all over the course of the double stint there. So Porsche had a difficult start, but then, really came on strong at the end. Now, Peugeot, of course, they have this avant-garde concept to their car, no rear wing. They have different sized tyres to all the other cars in class. Now, their performance, yes, absolutely, as you were saying, was hamstrung at times by reliability issues. They had a gearbox problem, actually a gear selection problem at the first race at Sebring, and they knew they potentially could have it and actually had a fix in the works for race 2. But it really, sometimes that car worked, and we saw it at Le Mans. It was quick, especially in the sort of changeable conditions on Saturday evening through the night. And then we saw it again at Monza, a circuit that doesn't have so many slow corners. Now, where you have slow corners, that car with its lack of rubber at the rear, because it has equal size front and rear tyres, really struggled. And looking back to Sebring, clearly that was going to be an issue for them there on a sort of bumpy, low grip surface. So basically, Toyota's performance really was based on 2 things. One, if they were reliable, and B, if the circuit suited their car. And sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't. And Monza was clearly the best circuit for them, where they led on pace, whereas at Le Mans they sort of led because of the conditions and some good strategic calls, but they were fast enough at Monza to lead the race and actually get their first podium. But that inconsistency across all circuits is why they are abandoning the current philosophy of the original 9X8, and they're going to the bigger tyre at the rear. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see a rear wing on the car as well.
Analysis of a Peugeot season, Gary, is that I really felt that with them not having a rear wing, maybe it's too simplistic to look at it this way, but it was more of a ground effect car. And now, because of Formula One, we've all become accustomed to ground effects, what it is, the floor doing the majority of the work that pulls the car down, the majority of your downforce comes from the floor. It means that to make it work efficiently, you have to run the car lower. And if you go to a bumpy circuit like Sebring, where the car's bouncing all around, you lose so much of that valuable downforce the floor is trying to create. And I think on top of their tyre issues, as you've mentioned, they were suffering with their overall concept as well. Some of these tracks you go to in the World Endurance Championship are a little bit rough and ready, as Sebring is. It's renowned for its bumps. And we've got Austin as well, of course, coming up next year, which is another bumpy track. So, that kind of concept, you get the porpoising, you get a lot of bad effects from the way they were running their car.
Well, I think we can all agree that those three teams have had their challenges throughout the 2023 season. And we'll move on to 2024 in a little moment. But looking back at 2023 for one last time, what are your standout performances? And what's your standout moment of the season? And let's start with you.
I think the standout performances really for me was the car number 7 crew in Toyota. They had some bad luck this year. They had an FIA torque sensor fail in Portimao when it looks like a dead cert for victory. The car was reliable apart from that, so there's nothing that the team did wrong, and it put them out of the race. They scored very little points that weekend, and it looked like they were, like I say, were on for victory. And then Le Mans, they got slammed up the back when Kobayashi was driving under a slow zone and really caught out there and wiped out of the race. It would have been interesting to see how they would have got on as well with that Ferrari fight. But I think that the driver crew were pretty much impeccable this year. I think Kobayashi's always phenomenal in qualifying. He always turns the speed up there. And then you got Mike Conway, who for me is just the epitome of what a sports car racer should be. He goes about his work in such a professional way, rarely makes mistakes. I think he had one practice shunt at Le Mans this year. That's all. That's the only bad thing that happened to him all season. And that was in the pre-race test as well, not even in the proper race week testing. So yeah, I think he for me was a real standout this year. He goes about his work quietly, methodically, but he's always fast in the race. And I think, right up until the end of the championship, they didn't give up that fighting spirit that they started with, even though they knew it was a long shot in Bahrain to try and overcome the sister car number 8 that walked away with the championship. But of course, the true standout for me was commentating. I think it was about 2 hours into the race where we saw a genuine fight of 6 or 7 cars, line astern, coming down the Mulsanne Straight. I remember thinking, I'm not sure I can do this for 24 hours, let alone driving the cars like they were. But even talking about it was like talking about the end of a horse race. That was magic.
Of course. I'm sure that we'll never forget that one going down the Mulsanne Straight. It was absolutely crazy. So many moments that are absolutely iconic throughout this season. Gary, let's come to you and talk about your standout moments and standout driver performances. Do you agree with Anne regarding the number 7 Toyota?
Well, for me, the standout driver was Antonio Fuoco. We were banging on about his 2 poles, the pole out of the blue at Sebring, and then going 7 tenths quicker than his teammate, Alessandro Pierguidi, when there was that Ferrari lockout at Le Mans. Well, yeah, clearly that shows 1 lap pad pace. But there were times in the races, Le Mans was one of them, where his consistency, his averages, and he was, I think he actually sort of, outperformed some of his teammates, more experienced teammates, by a significant margin. Now, you can say at Le Mans, that car, the 50 car, was on the comeback trail because it had problems during the night. It lost, I don't know, 10 laps or whatever. So, you know, you're driving slightly differently, as Ad will tell you, than if you're battling. Okay, it was flat out at the front, but there's a different kind of nothing to lose flat out and flat out battling for the lead. So clearly, you know, you bang the curbs at Le Mans, you can gain a lot of time. But there are other times when I just thought, yeah, that kid's a bit special. So he was the standout driver for me. I'm going to say the magic moment, and it's not really a moment because it's sort of a prolonged period of a few hours, and it was just as sort of after lunch, around lunchtime at Le Mans on the Sunday, as a sort of the balance was changing. That, you know, Ferrari had a little problem. Toyota got ahead, but Ferrari was quicker, and sort of Piquidi had that got around the outside of Buemi, I think, this second chicane, was it? You know, or you know, they had a great battle as Ferrari got back in the lead. Looked like Ferrari's got the quicker car, but then the track was changing, the temperatures were changing, and then Toyota came back into it, and Brendan Hartley was catching Collado, I think, for the lead, and we thought suddenly we've got a race on our hands. You know, what had been 20 something seconds came down to like 9 or 10 seconds. And then Ryo Hirakawa got in the car, and he had that sort of heart-wrenching spin turnage where he, you know, front and rear, he tagged the barriers, and then it was sort of game over. We thought Ferrari were just going to cruise to victory, but then they had a recurrence of that electronic glitch that had brought Toyota back into the frame, and there was that sort of, you know, heart in the mouth moment with Pierre Guidi with like half an hour to go, fiddling with the switches, which were sort of up on the roof of the Ferrari, to do one of those reboots that we see with hybrid racing cars so often.
Of course, many, many incredible moments throughout the season, as you've both just picked up on. But we've spent a lot of time talking about Hypercar and their moments, and let's take a little bit of time to talk about LMP2 and LMGTE AM, which will be leaving actually at the end of 2023, but we'll come on to that. Let's start with LMP2 and because there were some terrific battles between the WRT, United Autosport, the Inter Europol, and it was the WRT which came out on top in the end, but there were some incredible battles all season long, wasn't there?
Yeah, there really were, Steph. I mean, LMP2, it always brings the action. And in many ways, it's the purest, or was the purest category within the WEC, because pretty much everyone races with the Orica chassis. There are other choices, but they all end up with the Orica. And you've got the Gibson, normally aspirated V8 engine as well. And there's nothing you can do to the cars. You're stuck on Le Mans downforce for the whole season now these days. And you can't tinker with any of the suspension, or you can't upgrade your car in any way. So it brings a lot more focus to the drivers. And yeah, I think the Robert Kubica car crew this season, they won the championship. I think they had such a dominant year. You look at different races, you know, there's always safety car periods, and in Le Mans you have the slow zones and things like that really disrupt their races because they're so close. That any moment that a safety car situation brings, it kind of scatters the field a little bit sometimes. And they were the benefactors of that a few times, but they always had the speed. United Autosport, they had a lot of speed as well this season. I still feel like they should have won the opening race. They had some technical issues where I think it was, I believe that something to do with the onboard camera that went wrong, and that somehow shorted the whole car when they were in the lead of the race. And Josh Pearson was driving the stint of his life, the silver driver in that car crew. And he came to a grinding halt. So that race really got away from them. And I feel like then that gave the 41 car crew, a chance to really build a healthy lead in the championship, and they were never headed. So yeah, it's I've always enjoyed watching LMP2. There were some great battles all season long up and down the grid. We can't forget into Europol's victory at Le Mans, the surprise victory, stunned the whole paddock, I think, including themselves. They never saw that performance coming, but they had a big turnaround from halfway through the year and really boosted the whole team's morale, of course, after that victory. So yeah, some fantastic moments. They will be there, of course, next year at Le Mans, but not for the whole World Endurance Championship. And it's a shame not to see them there, but it's for good reason. It's because the hypercar category is growing, and the GT category, or GT3 as it will be next year now. We wave goodbye to GTE Pro Am. They were fantastic cars as well, but it's a shame not to have LMP2, but basically the tracks aren't big enough to accommodate all of these amazing categories and teams and drivers. Many of the teams and drivers will remain from LMP2. They'll be working in Hypercar. They'll be joining us. Like WRT will run the BMW next year, and others will drive in GT3. Other drivers will be in Hypercar. So, lots of familiar names, both drivers and teams, will still remain in the championship, just not LMP2 until we get to Le Mans.
And we've had a wonderful season to say goodbye to the LMP2, but another category we'll be saying bye to is the AMGTE, which will be replaced by the GT3. Corvette this year were the incredible dominant team, and they wrapped up the championship about halfway through the season, Gary. It was incredible from them. It was such a dominant campaign.
I mean, they actually sometimes say, we weren't so dominant. If you look at, quite often we won because when we weren't the quickest team. I think I'm not sure of that. For me, if they didn't win the championship, something was wrong. They were a factory team, Corvette Racing, who were sort of dipping their toe in GTE AM because they came into WEC last year, their first full WEC campaign in 2022 in GTE Pro. Now they came into AM essentially because next year Corvette Racing have a new car, a Corvette GT3 car, and with GT3, by regulation, you have to sell them to customers. And so they're learning about working with customers. The Ben Keatings of this world, who was the guy who financed the campaign this year. And it kept a foot in the door for them in the World Endurance Championship. So that was really important. But, they are one of the crack GT squads in the world. They've been there, done it at Le Mans, over in America as well. So yes, they're the best team, but they also had the best driver lineup. Now, Nicky Katzberg is the pro in that lineup, and you're only allowed one pro. And, obviously Katzberg is a great GT driver. He's won Spa. He's done phenomenal things at Spa. This year he won Nürburgring 24 hours. But, you could put 10 pros, or no, you could probably find 100 pros who should all be within a tenth and a half of each other, a tenth, 2 tenths. Now, the bigger differentials come with the other 2 drivers in the lineup. Now, the rules in GTE allow you 1 pro, as I said. You must have a bronze-rated driver. Now, that's for the true amateur. And in this case, it's Ben Keating, who's a 50-something-year-old car dealer from Texas. And then you have the silver driver, and that's a bit of a grey area. It's always contentious when the driver grading list comes out. But in those 2, so that's something in between. Sometimes it can be an up-and-coming single-seater driver who hasn't quite got the results to be a gold or certainly not a platinum. Or it could be a really good sort of semi-pro or amateur who is a bit younger than your sort of Keatings of this world. Now, in those 2 positions, Corvette Racing had the best drivers. So that was Keating and Nicholas Ferrone, the silver, who has now been upgraded to gold and has become a Corvette Racing factory driver, which sort of shows how good he is. So, there were times this year when Nicky Katzberg had it easy. His teammates did all the hard work because he normally got in the car last. So, yes, Corvette Racing dominated. They wrapped up the title at Monza with 2 races to go, and this is in a 7-race championship. But if they didn't win, I think something would have been wrong because they're the best team and they had the best driver lineup.
Well, in GT, we had to wait until the very final race of the year in Bahrain, but the Iron Danes took a victory. Gary, they're such an important team in WEC, in this sports car world. What made that victory so sweet for them?
Well, what made it sweet for me is that they'd been knocking on the door for sort of a year and a bit, a year and a half. They really sort of emerged as a leading player in GTE. That's the lineup of Sarah Bovey, Rahel Frey, and Michelle Gatting. At the end of 2022, they've had any number of poles. They've been in the hunt, but they've never quite, been able to deliver on that promise and score a victory. So I think for me, at the last time of asking in a GTE car before the new rules come in place with LMGT3 last year, they finally got that victory in the bag. So I think everyone was happy, actually.
All right, taking a look ahead into 2024, we have some great races on the calendar. Heading back to COTA, we'll be going to Sao Paulo. And what are you most looking forward to in the season ahead?
Well, that's a big question. There's a lot to look forward to, Steph. Well, first of all, like you mentioned, some new circuits. Qatar, one that I've never been around before in anything, let alone a sports car and an endurance race. So that will be exciting. We saw this year in Formula One how savagely tough that race was in terms of the conditions, and things get pretty hot inside these enclosed sports cars. So that we'll wait and see how the drivers get on there physically. And then, COTA, I can't wait to see the World Endurance Championship back there. As much, I will miss Sebring for all of its character. We talked about the bumps and what a tight track that is, and what a challenge it brings to the drivers. But yeah, there's something really special about the circuit, the Americas. A circuit I really love to drive around and had some good success in my time at. And I'm excited to see this new current crop of hypercars around there, and the GT3s, of course. And Interlagos, what a circuit. That if there's one track in the world that you could just pick up and copy and paste in different locations around the world, it would be that one. Some really, it's a growing championship, one extra race on the calendar as well. So it'd be up to 8 races instead of the 7 that we had this year. And it just shows that the championship still continues to grow. And then you've got those extra teams. I can't wait to see the likes of Lamborghini and BMW join the fray as well. There are many others to join, of course, in the future. It just brings more teams, like I was talking about before, out of LMP2. And Joe to prove, they've paved the way here. They've proven that in the same season, they could go from LMP2 and jump into the hypercar category and lead Le Mans for a moment and really take the fight to the big names in the hypercar category. So we have other teams like WRT running the BMW. That would be phenomenal to watch them at work. And these teams have proven their worth in LMP2, and they'll be A grade by the time they get up to speed in hypercar. So yeah, that's really exciting. And then I've rarely watched GT3. I'm so accustomed to the GTE cars, and over the years in WEC, over the last 10 or so years, watching them fight it out, I'm yet to really get my eye in for GT3 and see what they have to offer. But new categories are always exciting, and just the 2 categories to talk about, of course, until we get to Le Mans. In many ways, it will make my job a bit easier behind the microphone commentating on it. But yeah, it's such a healthy grid. I cannot wait. We said it before 2023. We couldn't wait to see it. It had all the anticipation, and it didn't let us down. And next year, there's even more anticipation.
Well, as Ant has just mentioned, there are going to be some very big names entering the World Endurance Championship in 2024. Gary, who are you most looking forward to see out of those big name manufacturers and big name drivers who will be joining the championship?
Well, I'm interested in seeing BMW because I drive a BMW. BMW are such an important part of motorsport history. They've always been involved. There's never been a time when BMW haven't gone racing. Since BMW Motorsport was started back, sort of had its origins in the late 60s, then into the 70s. It celebrated its 50th anniversary, I'm going to say last year. So yeah, BMW is a motorsport brand. So to see it in my world competing for victory, trying to repeat the victory of one of my all-time favorite sports cars, that was the V12 LMR that took victory in at Le Mans in 1999 with the Schnitzer team, run by my old friend Charlie Lamb, who sadly died a few years ago, who was just one of the most remarkable and lovely people I've ever met in motor racing. So to see them back going for victory with WRT, who I've just been extolling the virtues of that team, that's as a manufacturer and who's back, I'm really excited about that. Well, in terms of drivers, like we've got big names coming out of the woodwork. Well, maybe that's probably the wrong term. Big names being signed up by the manufacturers. And I think, it's significant that the championship now has that significance. People are talking about it, has that traction, that some of the names that I'm going to talk about want to do it. Now, we're sitting here on a Friday afternoon in dank and miserable London. Well, I'm sitting here in dank and miserable London. I don't actually know where you are, Steph, but...
up in Manchester, still dank and miserable, I promise.
We're sitting here in dank and miserable London on a Friday afternoon, and Jota, if they were on schedule, have just announced a massive name for their expanded two-car team of Porsche 963s. Jenson Button, that's ex-Formula One world champion Jenson Button, will be doing a full season in that car, alongside Phil Hansen, who's a champion in LMP2 with United, and Oliver Rasmussen, who on occasion last year with Jota in LMP2 was phenomenal. So that's, Jenson Button. It doesn't get much bigger than that. It could have done, because we know that Sebastian Vettel was talking to Jota about a seat in that car. And now they were also talking to another driver I'm just going to mention, who won't be driving for Jota, but he will be moving up to Hypercar, and that's Robert Kubica, LMP2 champion with WRT, is going to be driving a Ferrari 499P. And now that's not a factory car, but it's a customer car, sort of run on a satellite basis by the factory team, AF Corsa. But I will get our hands slapped if we call it a factory car. It's officially billed as a customer car. And then one of the other manufacturers we've got coming, that's Alpine. We have Mick Schumacher is going to be at the wheel there, and now he's going to be dovetailing his drive with Alpine in their LMDH alongside his reserve role at Mercedes. So, and then we've got Daniil Kvyat who will be driving Lamborghini. Lamborghini are coming with just a single car to run by the iLynx car. Now their car is an LMDH as well, and they've got some big name drivers here, him among them. So yeah, we have got some very big names, and I better talk about one of the names who's going to be driving in LMGT3, and that's Valentino Rossi. Now he gave up riding bikes, well, professionally at least, a couple of years ago. For the last 2 years, he's been racing with WRT in the GT3 arena, first in an Audi, and then when WRT swapped over to BMW, he started racing a BMW with them and also became a BMW factory driver. Now he's been doing the GT World Challenge Europe for the past 2 years, which is in what I call the sort of SRO arena. That's the Stefan Rattel organization. He's now coming over to the WEC in the BMW M4 GT3 run by WRT. So WRT are going to be running two teams in the WEC, one for LMDH, one for GT3. Valentino Rossi is going to be part of that. So, in terms of big names, probably he will be the biggest in the WEC paddock. But when we get to Italy, which next year is going to be Imola and not Monza, I'm sure, that he is going to be a massive center of attention, and he's just going to bring more people into into the circuits, to turn on their tellies, to look at social media or whatever. He's just going to bring more eyeballs to the WEC. So, you know, I think everyone involved in the WEC and everyone who loves the WEC and everyone who loves sports car racing and Le Mans should be excited about all these big names, including a biker.
Well, I am very excited for one, and I'm not the only one. I'm sure we can all agree that 2024 promises to be an excellent season. Thank you so much to Ant for joining us, and also to yourself, Gary.
Yeah, and thank you for having me and sparing me the time to present our little sort of WEC review. And I hope we haven't gone on too long, but there was a hell of a lot to talk about, and I'm a bit worried that next year, with three extra manufacturers, that we won't be able to wrap it up in such a short time.
Well, thanks, Steph. Yeah, it's always a pleasure, and I'm pleased I could be here with you guys today.
Well, we are all very much looking forward to the 2024 season and what promises to be an outstanding season of racing. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button and hit the subscribe button while you are at it. But for now, all that's left to say is have a wonderful winter holiday and Happy New Year.